A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
The Western Australian state election is almost on us. Western Australians will go to the polls on the 8th of March. And there have been Meet the Candidate forums that are planned all around WA. Freedom for Faith has been working with churches and schools to host candidate forums. And Mike Southon, the Executive Director of Freedom for Faith, is joining us. Freedom for Faith activating the church to defend religious freedom. Hey, Mike, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thanks, Neil, for having me. It's great to be back.
Mike, 8th of March, it's not far away. Big issues, and you're involved as Freedom for Faith. What comes to mind to you, those sorts of issues that ought to be front of mind for the Christian believer, and especially around this thought of going and meeting the candidates and putting questions to them that are important? What's front of mind?
Yeah, well, the biggest issue and the most live issue is gay conversion therapy or LGBTIQ conversion therapy legislation that the Labor government is considering bringing in. They've made a commitment that they will bring in legislation that bans conversion therapy, and they have circulated a discussion paper about what that legislation could look like. That discussion paper looks a lot like the Victorian legislation, which has really silenced religious speech around sexuality in Victoria. And so that's a very concerning possibility.
Other issues too, no doubt, religious freedom and schools. This will be very important, even when we talk about federal issues for the federal election. But in WA, any particular thing that comes to mind around religious freedom and schools?
Yeah, so there's an ongoing conversation about whether faith-based schools can employ people who live out their faith and prefer to employ those people. It's a conversation that's been going on a bit, and I do know that the government is looking at it. They're coming under pressure from their left wing to stop faith-based schools from being able to choose to employ people who live out their faith, especially on issues of gender and sexuality.
When it comes to the parties in WA, I mean, it was like a bloodbath last time when the Labor Party won power. And Premier Roger Cook, no doubt, feeling fairly comfortable with the sorts of margins that all of his members are going into this election with. You've got a lower house and an upper house. Which one do you think is important for particularly those with a Christian mindset around voting might be focusing their thoughts around?
Well, as you said, in the lower house, at the end of the last election, 59 seats. 53 of them were held by Labor, with only 6 opposition. It was a bloodbath. To change or even threaten the Labor Party's majority in the lower house would need a swing of something like 20%, which isn't likely to happen. We expect a swing could happen of up to 15%, which does mean a lot of Labor MPs are looking at possibly losing their jobs. So they should be trying to make sure they get enough votes. But the upper house is really interesting. The new structure for the upper house is that the entire upper house is going to be re-elected at this election, which means you don't need very many votes to become an MLC in WA. About 2.6% of the votes in WA to get elected. So a lot of minor parties are real candidates and real options for getting into the lower house. And depending on the swing, they may end up holding the balance of power.
Okay, so there's groups like Australian Christians, and they've been battling at the coalface there for a long, long time. There's even the opportunity there that they may have a possibility of success. So getting those sorts of ethics into an upper house, having a voice, that would be something I guess would be fairly important for a lot of Christians to be thinking about.
Absolutely. In almost any other election, you would say minor parties don't have a chance of getting into the upper house. But in WA, Australian Christians and quite a lot of other minor parties, they really do have a shot. So it is worth looking at these parties and looking at their policies and seeing if voting for them it could really make a difference, yes.
Now, Freedom for Faith has been wonderfully instrumental in setting up amazing Meet the Candidate forums when there's elections on. What have you got planned for WA?
Or in WA, rather than trying to have a forum for every electorate, because they're quite small, we've been working with Christian Schools Association and a couple of other groups to help schools and churches to run forums in key places around Perth and a couple down the coast and one in Albury. The idea is to have, there will be a forum fairly close to you. It may not be your electorate, but you'll get to go and hear candidates. Candidates have been invited from all the major parties as well as Australian Christians and hear them on what their policies are. A few of them have already happened. A few are yet to happen, but others are being recorded or live streamed, so you can catch up if you missed out.
A little controversy going on in the state of Queensland around some MPs apparently being told that they shouldn't attend these forums because they'll be talking about some touchy issues around abortion. That doesn't seem to be the case in the majority of Australia. In WA, you've had a pretty good response from party headquarters, whether it's the ALP or the Liberal Party. What sort of responses have you been getting? Can you share any of those?
Yes, well, as you said, in Queensland, particularly the Liberal Party chose not to attend a lot of our forums, which was disappointing. In this case, the Liberal Party were extremely responsive, and indeed the Shadow Attorney General has volunteered to turn up to a number of these forums to answer questions directly. The Labor Party has been a little bit harder to get hold of, but we are still quite hopeful that we'll have Labor Party candidates at most of these forums.
So when a party doesn't turn up, sometimes someone's got a legitimate apology, but when there's a party that doesn't turn up, is that in fact making a statement that I'm boycotting this forum, or do you read between the lines and cut some slack? How do you see it when parties don't turn up?
Yeah, and sometimes parties on the Conservative side don't turn up because they think they can take us for granted. Other times, Labor MPs may be afraid that it's going to be a hostile experience and they're going to be attacked. We work really hard to try and demonstrate, no, this is non-partisan. This is always going to be very evenly, handily treated. And Labor, Liberal, Australian Christians, everyone's going to be treated with the utmost of respect. So it is sometimes hard to know why a candidate doesn't turn up. But if Labor MPs aren't turning up, it's not because they haven't been invited.
What about the questions that are posed when you have a Meet the Candidate forum? There's someone there moderating. It's in a church or in a school hall, or, it's somehow rather got a Christian focus because this is what Freedom for Faith is all about. A mix of economic questions and those social issue questions. Is that the way it typically works?
Yeah, so the forums normally have 4 or 5 opening questions which have been given to the candidates ahead of time, and they can be about religious freedom. In this case, many of the events are held at schools, and they're going to ask a couple of faith-based schools questions, but also asking about the cost of living crisis. Gambling has always been a big issue in every state. What are we going to do to protect our most vulnerable people from gambling practices? Questions like that, a broad spread of interest. But then the second half of the night asks questions from the floor. And so if you're there or if you're online, you can ask questions, and so they get a real breadth of what Christians are interested in or concerned about.
Mike, something personal from you here. Because you've been doing this now over a number of elections in different states, the way that we think about politics, the way that social values are legislated, and it does seem to me, and I'll get your opinion here, that many in the Christian church had been really just sitting back and letting it all go by, but there does seem to be a significant rise in the interest that people with a strong Christian faith have in elections. Is this something you might have noted?
Absolutely. I think Christians have realised that when we don't get involved in politics, decisions get made without us. And we don't have to always join a party or become an MP or Premier to be able to shape policy. We're voters, and there are a lot of us, and we're spread all over the state and all over the country. When we stand up just together and say, hi, there's some issues that we're concerned about, would you like to come and talk to us? We can actually have a really significant difference. And we've seen this in states. We've seen it in Queensland and New South Wales, where Christians just standing up together have significantly changed policy. Even under Labor governments, we've managed to change policy and fix bad decisions.
And no doubt, you've not just got a handful of people turning up to these forums, you've got packed venues. So something really worthwhile turning out to, because it does make a tremendous impact, no doubt, when you've got candidates who are faced with real issues and how they might respond. Hey, for people to get the detail about where these Meet Your Candidate forums are, I've got a website here, meetyourcandidates.org.au. That would be the one to go to, and you can also connect, and I'm sure there's a link there on the freedomforfaith.org.au website, freedomforfaith.org.au. But for listeners in Western Australia, meetyourcandidates.org.au. Mike Southon is Executive Director of Freedom for Faith. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for an update today on 2020.
Thanks, Neil. It's great to chat.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.